The stars stretched endlessly before the USS Vanguard, their light flickering faintly against the blackness of space. On board the massive human battleship, Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, his sharp blue eyes scanning the holographic display hovering above the central console. The ship had been traveling for weeks now, far from Earth and its struggling colonies. Their mission was clear but dangerous: to explore uncharted regions of space in search of resources that could save humanity from collapse. Yet every jump into the unknown carried risks, and today felt different. There was an unease in the air, a tension that no one could quite put into words. Daniel turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Laura Bennett, who stood nearby with her arms crossed. She was young but sharp, her blonde hair tied back neatly in a bun. "Anything unusual on the scanners?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Laura shook her head slightly, tapping a few commands into her wrist-mounted interface. "Nothing out of the ordinary so far, sir," she replied. "But we're approaching the edge of known space. If there's anything strange out here, this is where we'll find it." The crew worked silently around them, each member focused on their tasks. The hum of the engines filled the background, steady and reassuring. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He glanced at the navigation officer, Ensign Ryan Cole, a wiry man with short brown hair and a nervous habit of biting his lip when under pressure. "Ryan, give me a status update on our position," Daniel said, moving closer to the navigation station. Ryan quickly pulled up the data, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're about 20 minutes away from crossing into uncharted territory, Captain," he reported. "No signs of any ships or structures in the vicinity." Daniel nodded slowly, his mind racing. They were close to the border of the Stellar Empire, an alien regime known for its strict control over vast stretches of space. Humanity had never dared to cross into Imperial territory before. Doing so would almost certainly provoke a violent response. But there was also curiosity driving Daniel forward. What lay beyond? Could they gather valuable information without being detected? As the Vanguard moved deeper into the void, the sensors suddenly picked up something unexpected. A faint energy signature pulsed weakly in the distance, barely noticeable against the static of deep space. Chief Engineer Marcus Lee, a tall man with dark skin and a perpetual frown, leaned over the sensor readouts. His brow furrowed as he analyzed the data. "Captain," he said, his voice low and urgent, "this isn't natural. Whatever it is, it's artificial." Daniel straightened immediately, his instincts kicking in. "Can you pinpoint the source?" he asked. Marcus nodded, adjusting the settings on the console. "It's coming from just beyond the asteroid field ahead," he explained. "Looks like some kind of vessel, but it's not transmitting any signals. Could be derelict." Daniel hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. Crossing into Imperial territory was risky enough, but investigating an unknown object could make things even worse. Yet ignoring it might mean missing a critical opportunity to learn more about the Empire, or perhaps gain an advantage. "Set a course for the coordinates," Daniel ordered finally. "Let's take a closer look." The crew sprang into action, adjusting the ship's trajectory. As they approached the asteroid field, the tension aboard the Vanguard grew palpable. The asteroids loomed large outside the windows, their jagged surfaces reflecting dim starlight. Navigating through such dense debris required precision, and Ryan worked tirelessly to plot a safe path. "We're clear," he announced after several tense minutes. "Approaching the target now." Through the viewport, the mysterious object came into view. It was indeed a ship, or what remained of one. Its sleek design suggested advanced technology, but large sections of its hull were scorched and broken. The nameplate on the side was unreadable, damaged beyond recognition. "That's definitely not human," Laura murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "Could it be Imperial?" Before anyone could answer, alarms blared throughout the ship. The sensor operator shouted, "Multiple contacts incoming! Large fleet bearing down on us!" Daniel spun around, his heart pounding. On the main screen, dozens of red dots appeared, rapidly closing the distance. "They're Imperial," Marcus confirmed grimly, "and they've locked on to us." Panic rippled through the bridge, but Daniel forced himself to stay calm. "Activate the phase cloak," he commanded sharply. Marcus hesitated, his expression troubled. "Sir, the system isn't fully tested yet. We don't know how stable it is." Daniel fixed him with a hard stare. "Do it anyway. We don't have a choice." With a nod, Marcus entered the command, and the ship shuddered violently as the experimental cloaking device powered up. For a moment, everything seemed to blur, the world around them dissolving into a haze of shifting colors. Then, just as suddenly, the Vanguard disappeared from sight. On the main screen, the Imperial ships continued their approach, sweeping the area with powerful scanners. But they found nothing. The humans held their breath, waiting for the enemy to move on. After what felt like an eternity, the fleet began to withdraw, convinced that their initial readings had been a false alarm. Only then did Daniel allow himself to relax slightly. "Good work, everyone," he said, though his tone was heavy with concern. "But we're not out of danger yet." The phase cloak had worked, but at a cost. Damage reports flooded in from across the ship, detailing strained systems and overloaded circuits. Worse still, the cloaking device had drained their reserves, leaving them stranded deep within Imperial territory. As the reality of their situation sank in, Daniel knew they faced a daunting challenge. Not only did they need to repair the ship and find a way home, but they also had to avoid drawing further attention to themselves. One wrong move and the entire Empire would descend upon them. Unbeknownst to the crew of the Vanguard, their brief incursion had already sent shockwaves across the Empire. News of a human warship daring to enter Imperial space spread quickly, igniting both fear and hope among those living under the Empire's iron rule. For centuries, the Empire had maintained its dominance through sheer force and intimidation. But now, whispers of rebellion began to take root. The mere presence of the Vanguard proved that humanity was capable of standing up to the Empire, and that knowledge alone was enough to inspire change. Back on the ship, Daniel gathered his senior staff in the briefing room. The mood was somber as they discussed their next steps. "We can't stay hidden forever," Laura pointed out. "Eventually, they'll figure out we're here." Daniel nodded, rubbing his temples. "I know, but right now, our priority is survival. We need to assess the damage, conserve power, and plan our escape route carefully." Marcus chimed in. "Repairing the phase cloak will take time, and even if we fix it, using it again could tear the ship apart." Despite the grim outlook, there was a glimmer of determination among the crew. They had come too far to give up now. Each member of the Vanguard understood the stakes, not just for themselves, but for all of humanity. If they failed, the Empire would crush any hope of resistance. But if they succeeded, they might spark a movement that could reshape the galaxy. As the hours passed, the crew worked tirelessly to stabilize the ship. Engineers crawled through narrow maintenance tunnels, patching leaks and rerouting power. Scientists pored over data collected from the derelict alien vessel, searching for clues about its origins. Meanwhile, Daniel paced the bridge, lost in thought. He knew the road ahead would be fraught with peril, but he also believed in the resilience of his people. Together, they had faced impossible odds before, and they would do so again. Far away, Admiral Soren Dax studied the reports from the patrol fleet that had encountered the ghostly intruder. Though the human ship had vanished, its impact lingered. For the first time in decades, cracks were beginning to form in the Empire's foundation. Dissent simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. Dax clenched his fists, vowing to hunt down the invaders and crush them before they could cause further disruption. Little did he know, the real storm was only just beginning. This concludes Part 1, written in simple and basic English, adhering to your instructions. Would you like me to proceed with writing Part 2 in a similar format? The USS Vanguard drifted silently through the darkness of space, its systems strained and its crew weary. The experimental phase cloak had saved them from immediate destruction, but the cost was high. Damage reports poured in from every corner of the ship, detailing overloaded circuits, leaking coolant lines, and unstable power grids. Chief Engineer Marcus Lee worked tirelessly in the engine room, his face streaked with grease and sweat as he tried to stabilize the battered systems. The cloaking device itself was offline, leaving the ship vulnerable if the Empire's forces returned. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic display that showed their current position deep within Imperial territory. They were stranded, low on supplies, and surrounded by enemies who would show no mercy if they were discovered. Daniel turned to Lieutenant Laura Bennett, who leaned over a console nearby. Her expression was tense, her blue eyes scanning the readouts for any sign of danger. "We need a plan," Daniel said, his voice steady but firm. "We can't stay here forever." Laura nodded, though her mind raced with doubts. "There's a planet not far from here," she replied. "Epsilon 7. It's a mining world under Imperial control, but it's remote enough that we might be able to slip in unnoticed." Daniel frowned, considering the risks. Landing on an Imperial planet was dangerous, but they had few options. "All right," he said finally. "We'll send a small team to gather intel and see if there's anything we can salvage, but we move carefully." The next morning, Laura and Ensign Ryan Cole prepared to leave the ship. Disguised in Imperial uniforms, scavenged from the derelict vessel they had encountered earlier, they boarded a small shuttle and set course for Epsilon 7. As they descended through the planet's thick atmosphere, the landscape below came into view. The surface was scarred by massive mining operations, endless pits and tunnels carved into the rocky terrain. Towering machines loomed over the horizon, their mechanical arms clawing at the ground in search of precious minerals. Smoke rose from processing plants, choking the air with a haze of ash and fumes. It was a harsh and unforgiving place, ruled by the Empire with an iron fist. The shuttle landed in a secluded area near the edge of a sprawling settlement. Laura and Ryan stepped out cautiously, their disguises blending them into the crowd of workers trudging toward the market hub. The miners moved with slumped shoulders and hollow eyes, their faces marked by exhaustion and despair. Imperial overseers patrolled the streets, their weapons ready to enforce order at a moment's notice. Laura kept her head down, avoiding eye contact as she and Ryan made their way deeper into the settlement. At the market hub, they found a chaotic scene. Stalls lined the streets, selling everything from food rations to spare parts for mining equipment. Merchants shouted over one another, trying to attract customers, while workers bartered for essentials. Laura scanned the crowd, searching for anyone who might have useful information. That's when she noticed him, a tall man with shaggy black hair and a scruffy beard, leaning against a wall and watching the chaos with sharp green eyes. His clothes were patched and worn, but there was something about his demeanor that set him apart from the others. He looked like someone who didn't belong. Laura nudged Ryan and nodded toward the man. "Let's see what he knows," she whispered. They approached cautiously, and the man glanced up as they drew near. "You two look lost," he said, his voice low and gravelly. Laura forced a smile, trying to appear relaxed. "Just passing through," she replied, "looking for supplies." The man studied them for a moment, then smirked. "Funny thing to say in Imperial gear," he remarked, "especially since you don't look like soldiers." Caught off guard, Laura hesitated, unsure how to respond. But before she could speak, the man held up a hand. "Relax," he said. "I'm not with them." He gestured for them to follow him, leading them to a quiet alley away from prying eyes. Once they were alone, he introduced himself. "Name's Cale," he said. "Used to be an Imperial officer until I got tired of following orders." Laura raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Cale shrugged. "Surviving, same as everyone else. But I hear things, rumors, and word is spreading fast about your little stunt out there." Ryan stiffened, glancing nervously at Laura. "What do you mean?" he asked. Cale chuckled softly. "You really think a human ship crossing into Imperial space goes unnoticed? People are talking. Some are scared, sure, but others—" He paused, his expression turning serious. "Others see hope. You've given them something to believe in." Laura exchanged a glance with Ryan, both of them realizing the gravity of what Cale was saying. Their actions had sparked something, far bigger than they had anticipated. Cale went on to explain the situation on Epsilon 7. The miners lived under brutal conditions, working long hours for meager rations while the Empire took the profits for itself. Governor Maris Voss, a ruthless overseer known for her cruelty, ruled the planet with an iron grip. But discontent was growing, fueled by whispers of rebellion spreading across the empire. The arrival of the vanguard had ignited a spark, inspiring some to dream of freedom. However, Kale warned that Governor Voss was preparing to crush any dissent before it could take hold. A crackdown was imminent, and the miners would bear the brunt of her wrath. Laura listened intently, her mind racing. If they acted quickly, they might be able to help the miners fight back. But it would require careful planning and trust. "What if we could give you an edge?" she asked. Kale raised an eyebrow. "An edge?" Laura nodded. "Weapons, supplies, whatever you need to make a stand." Kale considered her offer for a moment, then grinned. "You drive a hard bargain," he said. "But all right. Help us, and I'll get you what you need to fix your ship. Deal?" Back on the Vanguard, Daniel listened intently as Laura and Ryan reported their findings. The idea of aiding a rebellion was risky, but it aligned with their mission to weaken the Empire's grip on the galaxy. "If we can inspire others to rise up, we might have a chance," Daniel said thoughtfully. "But we have to be smart about this." He turned to Marcus, who stood nearby with a clipboard in hand. "How much longer until the phase cloak is operational?" Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "A few days, maybe. But even then, it's not guaranteed to work without frying the entire system." Despite the challenges, the crew sprang into action. Under Kale's guidance, they smuggled weapons and equipment down to the miners, teaching them how to use the tools effectively. Laura and Ryan worked closely with the resistance leaders, helping them organize their forces and plan their attack. Meanwhile, Marcus and his team labored around the clock to repair the Vanguard, knowing that their survival depended on getting the ship back in fighting shape. As the day of the uprising approached, tension filled the air. Governor Voss had increased patrols throughout the settlement, her soldiers cracking down on even the smallest infractions. Miners were rounded up and interrogated, their families threatened with punishment if they didn't cooperate. Fear spread, like wildfire, threatening to extinguish the fragile flame of rebellion. But Kale refused to give up. "We strike tonight," he declared during a secret meeting in an abandoned warehouse. "Hit them hard and fast. Show them we're not afraid." That night, the rebellion erupted. Explosions rocked the settlement as sabotaged machinery collapsed, halting production and plunging the area into chaos. Armed miners clashed with Imperial troops in the streets, their cries of defiance echoing through the night. From orbit, the Vanguard provided support, using its remaining firepower to disable key installations and cut off reinforcements. The battle was fierce, but the rebels fought with a determination born of desperation. For the first time in years, they tasted the possibility of freedom. Amidst the chaos, Ryan stayed behind to ensure the detonation sequence completed, buying time for the others to retreat. When the dust settled, the governor's forces were in disarray, their authority shattered. The miners cheered, their spirits lifted by the victory. But the celebration was short-lived. News of the uprising reached Admiral Soren Dax, who vowed to crush the rebellion personally. His flagship, the Obsidian Blade, descended upon Epsilon 7, bringing with it the full might of the Empire. As the crew of the Vanguard regrouped aboard their ship, they knew the fight was far from over. They had struck a blow against the Empire, but the cost had been high. Ryan was missing, presumed captured, and the Empire's wrath was now focused squarely on them. Daniel gathered his team, his expression grim but resolute. "We started this," he said, "and we'll finish it, together." The crew nodded, united in purpose. Though the road ahead was uncertain, they were ready to face whatever came next. The USS Vanguard hovered silently in orbit around Epsilon 7, its crew battered but alive after the rebellion they had helped ignite. The uprising had been a success, at least for now. Governor Maris Voss's forces were scattered, her authority broken, and the miners celebrated their newfound freedom with cautious hope. But the victory came at a cost. Ensign Ryan Cole was missing, captured by Imperial troops during the final moments of the battle. Laura Bennett stood on the bridge, staring out at the planet below, her mind consumed by guilt and worry. She had argued fiercely against leaving Ryan behind, but the decision had been made. Now she couldn't stop thinking about him, alone and at the mercy of the Empire. Captain Daniel Hayes paced the command deck, his expression heavy with thought. He knew they couldn't abandon Ryan, not after everything he had done for the mission. Yet rescuing him would mean diving back into enemy territory, risking their lives and the lives of everyone aboard the ship. The crew was already stretched, thin, their resources dwindling, and the phase cloak still wasn't fully operational. Marcus Lee, the chief engineer, worked tirelessly in the engine room, trying to stabilize the damaged systems. But progress was slow. Every second that passed felt like another nail in Ryan's coffin. Laura approached Daniel, her voice firm but tinged with emotion. "We have to go back for him," she said. "He gave us the time we needed to escape. We can't just leave him to die." Daniel turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the weight of the decision. "I know," he replied. "But how do we do it without getting ourselves killed? The Empire is already hunting us. If we show our faces again, they'll tear us apart." Laura clenched her fists, frustration boiling inside her. "Then we find another way. Cale said he could help us. Maybe he knows a way to get Ryan out." With no other options, Daniel agreed to reach out to Cale, the smuggler-turned-rebel leader who had become an unlikely ally. A secure transmission was sent down to the surface, and within hours Cale responded. His voice crackled over the comms, weary but determined. "You really care about this guy, don't you?" he asked. Laura nodded, though he couldn't see her. "Yes," she replied. "He's one of ours, and we don't leave anyone behind." Kyle sighed, considering their request. "All right," he said finally. "I'll help you get him back. But it won't be easy. They've taken him to the main outpost, and it's crawling with guards. You'll need a distraction if you want any chance of pulling this off." The plan was risky, but it was all they had. Cale and his rebels would stage a diversionary attack on the outskirts of the settlement, drawing Imperial forces away from the outpost. Meanwhile, Laura and a small team would infiltrate the facility, locate Ryan, and extract him before reinforcements arrived. It was a long shot, but they had no choice. As the crew prepared for the mission, Marcus delivered grim news. "The phase cloak is still unstable," he reported. "If we try to use it again, it could fry the entire system." Daniel frowned, weighing the risks. "Then we'll have to rely on stealth and speed," he said. "Keep working on it. If things go south, we might need it as a last resort." That night, the operation began. Cale and his rebels launched their assault, setting off explosions near the mining pits and drawing the attention of Imperial patrols. The diversion worked, and most of the outpost's guards were dispatched to deal with the threat. Under cover of darkness, Laura led her team, composed of herself, 2 engineers, and a medic, down to the surface in a cloaked shuttle. They landed several kilometers away from the outpost and moved on foot, sticking to the shadows to avoid detection. The air was cold and tense, every sound making them flinch. The outpost loomed ahead, a fortress-like structure surrounded by high walls and patrolled by armed guards. Laura signaled for her team to wait while she scouted the perimeter. Using a handheld scanner, she located a weak point in the security grid, a maintenance hatch partially hidden by debris. Motioning for the others to follow, she led them to the hatch and pried it open with quiet efficiency. One by one, they slipped inside, finding themselves in a narrow corridor lit by flickering fluorescent lights. The interior of the outpost was a maze of corridors and rooms, each guarded by cameras and sensors. Laura moved carefully, disabling traps and bypassing security checkpoints as they went. Her heart raced with every step, knowing that discovery meant certain death. Finally, they reached the detention block, a grim area filled with cells and interrogation rooms. In one of the cells, they found Ryan. He was bruised and bloodied, his uniform torn, but he was alive. When he saw Laura, relief washed over his face. "You came," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Laura nodded, unlocking the cell door. "Of course we did," she said. "Let's get you out of here." As they retraced their steps toward the exit, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Someone had discovered the breach, and Imperial troops were converging on their position. Laura cursed under her breath, urging the team to move faster. Gunfire erupted behind them as soldiers closed in, forcing them to take cover in a side corridor. The medic patched up Ryan as best he could while Laura returned fire, her hands steady despite the chaos. "We're not going to make it," one of the engineers muttered, panic creeping into his voice. Laura glared at him. "We don't have a choice," she snapped. "Keep moving!" Just as it seemed they were cornered, Marcus's voice crackled over the comms. "Phase cloak is online," he announced. "But it's shaky. You've got maybe 30 seconds before it burns out." Laura hesitated, then made a split-second decision. "Activate it," she ordered. The world around them shimmered as the cloaking device powered up, rendering the team invisible to enemy sensors. For a brief moment, the Imperial troops paused, confused by the sudden disappearance of their targets. Seizing the opportunity, Laura led the group through the chaos and out of the outpost. They reached the shuttle just as the phase cloak failed, the ship flickering back into view. Imperial fighters screamed overhead, chasing after them, but the Vanguard intervened, laying down covering fire from orbit. The shuttle soared skyward, dodging blasts as it raced toward the waiting battleship. Once aboard, the crew breathed a collective sigh of relief. Ryan was rushed to the medical bay, where doctors worked to treat his injuries. Laura collapsed into a seat on the bridge, exhausted but grateful. "We got him back," she murmured. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression softening. "Good work," he said simply. Meanwhile, Admiral Soren Dax fumed aboard the Obsidian Blade. The human ship had slipped through his grasp once again, humiliating him in front of his superiors. Worse, the rebellion on Epsilon 7 had spread, inspiring other oppressed worlds to rise up against the Empire. Reports poured in of uprisings across the galaxy, each one fueled by tales of the Vanguard's defiance. Dax clenched his fists, vowing to crush the humans and their allies no matter the cost. "Find them," he growled to his subordinates, "and when you do, destroy them." Back on the Vanguard, the crew reflected on what they had accomplished, and the price they had paid. Their actions had ignited a spark of hope in the galaxy, but the Empire's response would be swift and brutal. Daniel gathered his senior staff in the briefing room, his tone serious but resolute. "We've started something we can't stop," he said. "The Empire won't rest until we're dead, but neither will we. If we stand together, we can change the galaxy." The crew nodded, united by a shared purpose. Though the road ahead was uncertain, they were ready to face whatever came next. Far below, on Epsilon 7, Kale watched the stars, his thoughts turning to the future. The rebellion was growing stronger, spreading like wildfire across the Empire. The humans had shown that even the smallest act of defiance could inspire change. As he gazed upward, he whispered a silent promise. "We'll keep fighting," he said. "For all of us." This concludes Part 3, written in simple and basic English, adhering to your instructions. Would you like me to proceed with writing Part 4 in a similar format? The USS Vanguard drifted through the void of space, its crew battered but alive after their daring rescue mission on Epsilon 7. Ryan Cole lay in the medical bay, his body bruised and broken but slowly healing under the care of the ship's doctors. Laura Bennett sat by his side, her face pale with exhaustion, but her eyes filled with relief. She had fought hard to bring him back, and now she refused to leave his bedside until he woke up. The rest of the crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage inflicted during their escape, knowing that the Empire would not rest until they were found. Admiral Soren Dax's flagship, the Obsidian Blade, was already scouring nearby systems, hunting for any sign of the rogue human ship. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic display that showed their current position. They were hiding in the shadow of a gas giant, its thick atmosphere masking their presence from Imperial sensors. But it was only a temporary solution. The phase cloak was still unstable, and their supplies were running dangerously low. Marcus Lee, the chief engineer, moved between consoles in the engine room, his hands blackened with grease as he tried to stabilize the damaged systems. "We can't keep running forever," Marcus muttered to himself, frustration etched into his face. "Sooner or later they'll find us." Daniel turned to Lieutenant Laura Bennett, who had returned to the bridge after checking on Ryan. Her expression was grim, but there was a spark of determination in her eyes. "What's our next move?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, his mind racing. They couldn't stay hidden indefinitely, but every option carried risks. Finally, he spoke. "We need allies," he said. "If we're going to stand against the Empire, we can't do it alone." Laura nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "Kale mentioned other rebel groups during our last transmission," she said. "Maybe we can reach out to them." With no time to waste, Daniel ordered the communications officer to send encrypted messages to known resistance cells across the galaxy. The response was slow at first, but eventually, replies began trickling in. Some were cautious, wary of trusting strangers, while others were eager to join forces. One message stood out: a rebel leader named Terran, operating from a hidden base deep within Imperial territory. Terran claimed to have valuable intelligence about the Empire's weaknesses and offered to meet with the Vanguard. Daniel weighed the risks carefully before deciding to accept the invitation. It was dangerous, but they needed every advantage they could get. The journey to Terran's base was fraught with peril. The Vanguard had to navigate through heavily patrolled sectors, relying on stealth and quick thinking to avoid detection. Marcus worked around the clock to keep the phase cloak operational, though it sputtered and threatened to fail at every turn. The crew held their breath as they slipped past Imperial patrols, their hearts pounding with each close call. Finally, they reached the coordinates provided by Terran. The base was hidden inside an asteroid belt, its entrance disguised by jagged rocks and debris. As the Vanguard docked inside the cavernous hangar, the crew prepared for the meeting. Daniel led a small team, including Laura and Marcus, onto the rocky surface of the asteroid. Terran greeted them personally, her sharp green eyes scanning the group with interest. She was tall and lean, her dark hair tied back in a tight braid. Her demeanor was calm but commanding, the mark of someone who had spent years leading rebels in a fight for survival. "You've caused quite a stir," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "The Empire is scrambling to contain the chaos you've unleashed." Daniel nodded, his expression serious. "We didn't plan for this," he admitted. "But now that it's started, we can't stop. We need your help to finish what we've begun." Terran studied him for a moment, then gestured for them to follow her deeper into the base. Inside, the rebels bustled with activity, preparing weapons and supplies for upcoming missions. Terran explained that the rebellion was growing stronger, spreading to dozens of worlds across the Empire. Each uprising was fueled by stories of the Vanguard's defiance, inspiring others to rise up against their oppressors. "You've given people hope," she said. "But hope alone won't win this war. We need strategy and firepower." Over the next few hours, Terran shared her knowledge of the Empire's inner workings. She revealed the locations of key military installations, supply depots, and communication hubs that could be targeted to cripple the Empire's operations. She also warned of Admiral Dax's relentless pursuit, his flagship closing in on their position with every passing hour. "If you want to strike back, you'll need to act quickly," she said. "Hit them where it hurts, and make sure they know it was you." Armed with new information, the crew of the Vanguard devised a bold plan. They would launch a series of coordinated attacks on Imperial targets, striking deep within enemy territory to sow confusion and fear. The rebels would provide support, launching simultaneous assaults on nearby planets to stretch the Empire's forces thin. It was a risky strategy, but it might give them the edge they needed. As they prepared to leave the base, Terran approached Daniel with a final piece of advice. "Remember why you're fighting," she said. "Not just for yourselves, but for everyone who dreams of freedom." Back aboard the Vanguard, the crew sprang into action. Marcus fine-tuned the phase cloak, pushing it to its limits despite the risk of failure. Laura coordinated with the rebels, ensuring that their attacks would be synchronized for maximum impact. Daniel addressed the entire crew, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "This is it," he said. "The Empire thinks we're weak, that we'll crumble under pressure. But they're wrong. Together, we'll show them what humanity is made of." The first attack came at dawn. The Vanguard emerged from the shadows of the gas giant, its weapons blazing as it targeted a massive supply depot orbiting a nearby planet. Explosions lit up the darkness as cargo ships and storage facilities were reduced to rubble. Imperial fighters scrambled to respond, but the rebels struck simultaneously on the planet's surface, overwhelming local garrisons and freeing thousands of enslaved workers. The Empire's forces were stretched thin, unable to contain the chaos. erupting across multiple fronts. Admiral Dax watched the reports flood in, his anger boiling over. "Find them!" he roared, slamming his fist on the console. "I want that ship destroyed!" The obsidian blade raced toward the conflict, its weapons primed for battle. But the Vanguard was already gone, slipping into the void once again. The rebels cheered their success, their spirits lifted by the victory. Yet the cost was high. Several rebel cells were wiped out during the attacks, their sacrifices ensuring the larger mission's success. Among the fallen was Kale, who had stayed behind on Epsilon 7 to lead a final stand against Imperial reinforcements. His death hit the crew hard, a reminder of the price of freedom. As the Vanguard regrouped in deep space, the crew reflected on what they had achieved and the challenges ahead. They had struck a blow against the Empire, proving that humanity was capable of standing up to tyranny. But the war was far from over. Admiral Dax's fleet was still hunting them, determined to crush the rebellion once and for all. Daniel gathered his senior staff in the briefing room, his expression grim but resolute. "We've shown them we're not afraid," he said. "But this is just the beginning. If we want to win, we'll need to keep pushing forward." Laura nodded, her thoughts turning to Kale and the others who had given their lives for the cause. "They believed in us," she said softly. "We can't let them down." Marcus clenched his fists, his frustration giving way to determination. "Then let's finish what we started," he said. "For Kale, for Earth, for everyone." The crew echoed his sentiment, united by a shared purpose. Though the road ahead was uncertain, they were ready to face whatever came next. Far away, Admiral Dax stared out at the stars, his mind consumed by thoughts of revenge. The humans had humiliated him, challenging the Empire's dominance and inspiring rebellion across the galaxy. He vowed to hunt them down, no matter the cost. "You may think you've won," he muttered to himself, "but this war is far from over." The USS Vanguard drifted silently through the darkness of space, its crew weary but resolute after months of relentless conflict. The rebellion they had ignited had spread like wildfire across the galaxy, inspiring countless worlds to rise up against the stellar empire. Yet with every victory came new challenges, and the Empire's grip tightened as Admiral Soren Dax pursued them with unrelenting fury. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed their position deep within Imperial territory. They were close to the heart of the Empire now, closer than any human ship had ever dared to go. But the cost of their journey weighed heavily on him. Friends had been lost, sacrifices made, and the scars of battle ran deep. Laura Bennett sat. Nearby, her hands clasped tightly as she stared out at the stars. She thought of Kale, whose bravery had inspired so many, and Ryan, who still bore the physical and emotional wounds of his captivity. The crew had endured unimaginable hardships, yet they remained united by a shared purpose. "We've come this far," Laura murmured to herself. "We can't stop now." Daniel overheard her words and turned to face her, his expression softening. "You're right," he said, "but the hardest part is still ahead of us." The final phase of their mission was clear. They would strike at the Empire's core, targeting its central command hub, a fortress-like structure orbiting the Empire's capital world. Destroying it would cripple the Empire's ability to coordinate its forces, leaving its military fragmented and vulnerable. It was a desperate plan, one that could mean the end of the Vanguard and everyone aboard. But it was also their only chance to turn the tide of the war. As the crew prepared for the assault, Marcus Lee worked tirelessly in the engine room, fine-tuning the phase cloak and reinforcing the ship's defenses. "If we survive this," Marcus muttered to himself, "I'm taking a very long vacation." The journey to the capital world was fraught with danger. Imperial patrols grew denser as they approached, forcing the Vanguard to rely on stealth and quick thinking to avoid detection. The phase cloak flickered intermittently, threatening to fail at any moment, but Marcus refused to give up. "Just a little longer," he whispered, his hands trembling as he adjusted the controls. Finally, they reached their destination, slipping into orbit around the capital world under cover of darkness. The command hub loomed ahead, a massive structure bristling with weapons and surrounded by a fleet of Imperial warships. Daniel gathered the crew for one final briefing. His voice was steady, but filled with emotion as he addressed them. "This is it," he said. "Everything we've fought for comes down to this moment. If we succeed, we'll give the rebellion a fighting chance to win. If we fail—" A paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "If we fail, we'll still have struck a blow that the Empire will never forget. No matter what happens, we've already changed the galaxy." The crew nodded, their resolve unwavering. They knew the risks, but they also knew they couldn't turn back. As the vanguard moved into position, the Empire's fleet sprang into action. Alarms blared across the command hub, and Imperial fighters surged toward the intruder. The battle began with a deafening roar as lasers and missiles streaked through space. The vanguard's shields shimmered under the onslaught, holding firm despite the intense barrage. Marcus shouted updates from the engine room, his voice strained but determined. "Shields are at 60%, he reported. Phase cloak is stable, for now." Laura manned the weapons console, her fingers flying over the controls as she returned fire, targeting Imperial ships with precision. Explosions lit up the void as the battle raged on. Admiral Dax watched the chaos unfold. From the bridge of the Obsidian Blade, his face a mask of fury. "They're trying to destroy the command hub," he growled. "Stop them at all costs." The flagship surged forward, its massive guns trained on the vanguard. Daniel saw the threat and ordered evasive maneuvers, but the Obsidian Blade was relentless, its firepower unmatched. The vanguard shuddered violently as a direct hit tore through its hull, sending sparks flying across the bridge. "Damage report," Daniel shouted. "Port side breached," an officer replied. "Casualties in sections 3 and 4. Despite the damage, the crew fought on. Laura locked onto the flagship's engines, firing a concentrated blast that crippled its propulsion systems. The Obsidian Blade drifted helplessly, its guns silent for the first time in the battle. Admiral Dax slammed his fist on the console, his rage boiling over. "You won't win," he snarled. "The Empire will crush you." But his words rang hollow as the vanguard broke through the blockade and positioned itself directly beneath the command hub. The final assault began. The vanguard unleashed everything it had, targeting the hub's power core with a barrage of missiles and torpedoes. Explosions rippled across the structure, its defenses crumbling under the relentless attack. Inside the hub, Imperial officers scrambled to evacuate, their panic spreading through the corridors. Admiral Dax watched helplessly as the command center, the heart of the Empire's military, was reduced to rubble. The loss was catastrophic, not just for the Empire, but for Dax himself. His failure would haunt him forever. Back aboard the Vanguard, the crew cheered as the command hub collapsed in a fiery explosion. Their mission was complete, but the cost had been high. The ship was battered and scarred, its systems on the verge of collapse. Marcus limped onto the bridge, his face pale but triumphant. "We did it," he said weakly. "Now let's get out of here before the rest of the fleet shows up." Daniel nodded, ordering the crew to prepare for a jump to hyperspace. The phase cloak flickered one last time as the Vanguard vanished into the void, leaving the shattered remnants of the Empire behind. In the days that followed, news of the command hub's destruction spread across the galaxy. The rebellion celebrated the victory, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that the Empire's dominance was finally broken. On Epsilon 7 and other liberated worlds, people raised their voices in defiance, vowing to rebuild their lives free from oppression. Terran and her rebels continued their fight, pushing deeper into Imperial territory to secure their hard-won freedom. The legend of the Vanguard grew, inspiring others to join the cause. Aboard the Vanguard, the crew reflected on what they had achieved. They had started as a small group of explorers searching for resources, but they had become symbols of hope for an entire galaxy. Daniel stood on the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. "We've done something incredible," he said softly. "But the real work is just beginning." Laura joined him, her expression thoughtful. "The Empire isn't gone," she said. "It'll take years to rebuild what's been broken. But we've given people a chance to decide their own future." Marcus approached them, his usual frown replaced by a rare smile. "And maybe," he said, We've reminded everyone that even the smallest act of defiance can change the galaxy. Daniel nodded, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. Let's go home, he said. Earth needs to hear about this. The Vanguard set course for home, its battered frame carrying the hopes and dreams of billions. Though the road ahead would be long and difficult, the crew knew they had taken the first step toward a brighter future. Far away, Admiral Dax stared out at the wreckage of the command hub, his mind consumed by thoughts of revenge. The humans had humiliated him, toppling the empire he had sworn to protect, but even as he vowed to hunt them down, cracks were forming within the empire itself. Dissent spread among its ranks, with some questioning whether the cost of maintaining control was worth the price. For the first time in centuries, the empire's rule was no longer absolute. As the Vanguard disappeared into the stars, the galaxy held its breath, knowing that the echoes of their defiance would resonate for generations to come. This concludes Part 5, written in simple and bassy